Today we're going to talk about place value again. Today we're going to be looking at decimal place value. Our learning objective for today is I can tell the place value of a decimal number up to the millionths column. And hopefully you heard that TH sound in there, because when we talk about decimal place value columns, we have the THS at the end. Instead of million, it is millionths, that TH. So we can kind of identify the difference between $1 million and a millionth of a dollar, that TH at the end. Just like we mentioned with our whole numbers, decimal numbers are also on a base 10 system here, numbering system. We look at our whole number, 1, go down to our first decimal, 0.1. This is actually 10 times smaller. So instead of multiplying by 10, we're actually dividing by 10 as we keep moving along the decimal system. 0.01 is actually divided by 10 again. So if I go from here to there, I'm getting 10 times smaller. I kind of flip over to the next picture to look at some numbers. We talked about this. Let's get all the ones. 7 and 70. 70 is 10 times bigger than 7. 70, 700. 700 is 10 times bigger than 70. If I go back to 7 and go to 7/10, that's actually 10 times smaller, or divided by 10. 7/10, 700/10 is 10 times smaller. As I move that decimal back one spot, move it back one spot, move it back in 2 spots here, 2 numbers behind the decimal, you can see I'm dividing by 10 twice. If I look at a larger number here, as I move, let's start here at the ones, because that's kind of our first number we use. To start in the ones column, as I move this way, I'm getting bigger by 10 each time, 10 times bigger. Right? That's the same if I start over here. If I start at this 7, I'm still getting 10 times bigger as I go. So as you go this way in our numbering system, you're getting bigger by 10 at every place value move. And as you are going the other way, towards the right, you're getting 10 times smaller. Okay? 70, where that 7's at, is 10 times smaller than the million, or the 100, where that 7 is, 700. As I move from here to there, I got 10 times smaller. So you can see, as we move to the right, we get 10 times smaller. As we move to the left, we get 10 times bigger. This is actually part of what we'll look at later in the year with the metric system, how that measurement system works. It's using these numbers of 10s, 10 times bigger for each item, or 10 times smaller for each item. The key to know here right now is just the fact that as we move from one place value column to the next, we're either getting bigger by 10 or smaller by 10, and realizing that it's because we are in a base 10 model. Now we're going to look at the different place value columns we have for our decimal numbers. We start off once again on our ones. Behind the ones column, we have our decimal. As I read a number, that's where I use the word and. If I read a number 3 and 7/10, that and is where I put that decimal. The second number is not the ones. We go to the tenths column. I'll explain that here in a little bit. Why we don't have a once column. The first column behind the decimal is actually the tenths column. And we don't have a once. And once again, I'll explain that as we move along here. Then we go to hundreds. Once again, 100 comes right after 10. What comes after 100 in the right order column? thousand, so we have thousandths. After 1,000 is 10,000, so we have 10 thousandths. Probably guess 100 thousandths. What would be next? Maybe millionths, 10 millionths, 100 millionths. After millions would be billionths, 10 billionths, 100 billionths. After billion comes a trillion, so it would be trillions, 10 trillions, 100 trillions. You can count as far that way on the decimal system as you should be able to count as a decimal point on the other side, the right of the decimal. Because you just add that th, and the number pattern stays the same. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions, 10 millions, 100 millions. The difference is just that THS at the end. Now let's look at a number here. We're going to first, like we did with the number system here, we're going to kind of break this apart into our different numbers. So we'll move this 4, which is in the ones. Now behind the decimal, we start with our tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and 10,000ths. Now when we read a number like this, we really only actually read, for the decimal, the last place value column, the 10,000ths. So when I read this decimal number, I would read that as a regular number. So you can almost kind of put that comma there for yourself. 4, remember the decimals, and 4 and 7,138 10,000ths. That's how I'd actually read that number. I think an easy way to look at this is actually turn this into something you might not be as comfortable with. Actually, you're just kind of changing it into a fraction. It's an easy way to remember this. And it's kind of like what we did with the solid numbers. You put a 1 under the decimal and put a 0 under each number. Okay. I kind of think of that like a fraction. I have 4 and 7,138 10,000ths. So that's exactly how you make a decimal in a fraction. It's an easy way to help you read a decimal. Once again, we'll split this number into its place value columns. A lot of numbers behind the decimal here. Okay. The 2's and the 1's, tenths is the first, hundredths is 10 or thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, 10 millions. You can see then where each place value column of our numbers are. So if I want to know what the place value of the 9 is, the 9 is in the thousandths column. The 7 is in the millionths column. If I wanted to read this number out loud, I think the easiest way is to once again make it to a fraction, put a 1 under the decimal, a 0 under each number. Let me put my little fraction line there. I need to also put in the commas for myself, just to help me read this large number. I'm going to kind of put in commas here. It makes it easier for me to read it, because I need to read it as a regular number. If you need to, you write the little and here to remind yourself that's where the word and goes. 2 and here's 1,000, it's a million. 4,194,375. That's 10 millions. 10 millions. So a big old long number here. 2 and 4,194,375 10 millions. Okay, reading those numbers isn't too hard. If you work it, make it a fraction. You can write it a little bit out. Put the 1 in the decimal. Add zeros for every number. put in your commas, and read it almost just like a regular number, then with this number read after it. I don't think this one has the box anymore. Let's look at this one here. We have this large number. Let's try to find what's the place value of the 1. What column is that 1 in? We have a 1 there. What's the place value of 1? Just like how I was reading those numbers, to find the place value of that, would be to put a 1 underneath the decimal, put a 0 for every number, and this time I'm going to only go to the number I desire to know the place value of. Because I want to know the place value of the 1, I'm just going to write zeros up to the 1. That 1 is in the 100 thousandths place value. It's in the 100 thousandths place value. Real simple to find. Put a 1 at the decimal, and then add the zeros. Let's do another one of these numbers off here. Let's look at the 9. The 9 is in the hundredths column. 9 hundredths. Mentioned earlier, I'd explained why we don't have a once. Well, the once, we put the 1 right where the decimal's at. When we make a decimal into a fraction, that's where we put the 1 at, and we add a 0 for every number behind the decimal. Well, if you'd have 0.7, I think that was the example I used at the beginning. If I put a 1 under that decimal, and I put a 0 for every number behind it, if I had a single number, I would have a single 0. It has to be tenths. I can't have once, because to have a number behind it, I have to have a 0. So you can never have a decimal number in the ones column, because there is no ones column. The 1 goes right where the decimal is. So we have to start there with our tenths. That's the reason why when we count out decimals, there's no ones. It's the tenths, then hundreds, thousands, and so forth. Big long number, we can pick out different numbers and try to find the place value, combining both lessons here. Let's look at this 9 here. What's the place value of 9? Put a 1 under the decimal. Zeros for every number up to the 9. This number down here, don't forget my THS, is 100, and that count is million. So that's 100 millionths. That 9 is in the 100 millionths column.